Welcome to Lazy Acres Ranch. My girlfriend Beck and I live here, and we're in the workshop. And this is the Small Machines 101 or Small Equipment 101 by the FYFC BOCO grant. And we're here to kind of talk about two-stroke and four-stroke engines and the basics, the very, very basics of how to work with them such that they have the longest life and provide you with the least downtime. And we're going to go into the stuff today that's really pretty much the most basic on how to operate it, and then the quick and simple fixes for some of the minor issues that you might have while out in the field. So I'm sure all of you guys have used tools of all different kinds. A lot of them are made by engineers and people from far away, and they usually come with something like this. Sometimes they're really big and they have tons of pages. Depends on the size of the equipment, depends on the manufacturer. Sometimes they're next to nothing, but these are user manuals and these things are extremely important. They have a ton of information. They're not that interesting until you need them. So I recommend getting a file cabinet and having a place for them and not letting them get out into the field. And if they do, don't let them get wet, because otherwise you'll have to find new ones. You can definitely do that. It's all online. You need to figure out what machine you have and then the specifics on it, and then you can figure out where you are in that. If you don't want to fix things yourself, or you don't want to order your parts, you can just take it into the local hardware, or not, the hardware store can help, but also like Earl's Saw Shop in Boulder or Mac Equipment, they can also help, but it costs a little bit more. So if you keep your manuals, you read them, and you kind of know where the points are that you either want to do something or don't want to do something, it'll help those things last a bit longer. So I've got in my hand the electric chainsaw that I just recently got, haven't used it yet. I decided to actually get the same kind of batteries that I have with all my other equipment, just so that it all runs smoothly. And this one is a little bit different, so I'm gonna throw that aside, sorry. But looking at the different manuals that we have, this one is a bit more of a complicated one. Unfortunately, I lost my one for this still, so I can't pull it out exactly. But usually there is, what it is and what's in it, and then there's all this safety information, and this stuff is really important. I definitely would, well, the index of course, but then all the different cautions. And it's a lot of stuff that sometimes we forget. We're busy, we're trying to do a lot, but I highly recommend slowing down, breathing, and making sure that you're in the right place, you have the right equipment, because lots of bad things can happen. I mean, we could show old, 60s shop videos, and if anybody remembers any of those, they're hilarious and scary at the same time. But there's just a lot of different moving bits and pieces, and so we have to be aware that a lot of these machines can do a lot of damage because things are moving at high speed, or they're high pressure, or they're high temperature, or all of the above. So definitely make sure you have your manual, check it, see what's going on there. And we can go into more details if you have specific questions. Usually there's some sort of symbology on it, and you'll, excuse my symbology, my ability to recreate it. But in essence, these are the two biggest ones, on and off. So this is electric. This goes back to basically electrical engineering, where this is off because there's no circuit connecting, and this is on. So when something is on or has the potential to be on, you might be drawing power, and it also has the potential to kick on. And if that's a PTO, that can cause a lot of problems. And then also the two symbols for starting and RPM. So just kind of some very basics. Each brand and each one will have something similar, and so as you're kind of aware of how they work, and with time, you'll probably get used to your machine and then sometimes forget and go, why isn't it working? And again, you can go back to the manual to kind of figure that out. So the basics of gasoline-powered engines is you have two types. You have a two-stroke and you have a four-stroke. And that has to do with how they designed the engine to function. A two-stroke can be operated in pretty much any direction, upside down, left and right, but not underwater, of course, whereas a four-stroke pretty much has to be sitting, not perfectly level, but you can't take it and turn it upside down. So chainsaws and weed whackers are great examples of how you might move those things. And so the basics of a two-stroke is that the biggest difference between the two in terms of fuel type is that you have oil and fuel mixture that goes into this. And depending on the type of machine you have, it might be a 40-to-1 or a 50-to-1. And it could also be other than that, but those are the two most common ones, and you don't really want to mix them, or you don't want to put straight gas in, and you also don't want to mix your oil and fuel in there because it has the potential that it won't get fully mixed. I know it's hard, you're out in the field and you don't have anything to mix it with, but it is really, if you're going out in the field, you should have a can that is dedicated to it, say like this one, and this one basically has the ability to mix it, and then it has a nice spout for being able to, and then a handle to control how much is coming out. And then this gives you your fuel mixture ratio that you need. I would also write on it. I don't use this for an oil and fuel mixture, so I don't have that. I use this for pure non-ethanol gasoline. And the other option for this type of machine is to pick up a already pre-mixed fuel mixture. And so they make different ones of these. The great thing about this is they use a non-ethanol fuel in it, and so that's a pure gas, and then they use whatever the appropriate ratio of oil is. I've found that when I run this sort of stuff, you can start the machine pretty much any time if it's been sitting for 6 months, or if it's been, hot, cold, anything, it's good. It's a little bit more expensive, but to me it's great because you don't accidentally put this into your car or into a machine that can't take it, because you know exactly what it is, versus something that's written on a can might get rubbed off, especially because gas and oil can be abrasive and could act like a detergent. So those are the basics of the fuel type for the two-stroke engine. And I'll go through now basically the process to start it. And it's going to be pretty much similar for all of them. Some of them are going to have some nuances, what you have to pull, push, and where it is. So again, there's symbology that goes along with it. This one happens to have pretty much everything is located in this area here. And I guess actually I should step back. Before you're going to go start anything and do anything like that, you should probably get your PPE around. And I keep kits pretty much for each type of tool, or kind of varieties. This is the chainsaw / weed whacker. So you'd have all your safety gear with you, and you'd want to put all that on before you go and start it up, just in case. Now you probably fill it with fuel and get away with it, but I definitely recommend don't just going out for 10 minutes, just gonna do this. It's not great. And also, I don't have sunglasses on right now, but a lot of sunglasses aren't actually safety glasses. They keep the little bits from going, but if something were to really majorly have a lot of force, it could cause problems. So it is better to get a specific pair of safety glasses. So that's kind of all before you start the machine. Before you get out there, it's kind of know what you're working with, have your safety stuff around. And if you got a nice pair over there, because you do a lot of that, they can actually be quite comfortable and stylish, Or you can get these ones over here, which have lots of safety and no style. So, and then I also recommend, just kind of like little points that I've learned, don't let this sit around where it's going to rub and get broken. Make sure you go, get a glasses case or something that allows it to be protected, because there's nothing worse than, it bouncing around in the truck or the car, and then you go and you can't see anything. So how to start a two-stroke engine. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean the air filter, because pretty much this thing is operating in a very dirty environment, and most likely you put it away and didn't clean your air filter. So what I've got here is not an air filter for this, but something else. This is actually a really dirty one, just the colors, and there's going to be an in and out flow. And I have a compressor, and you've got different types of nozzles. This one's great. You can just kind of blow it out. I wouldn't get in there super close, but just enough, and don't do it in a workshop like this. Don't blow it at people. And then if you have your PPE on, you'll be safe. I also like, for harder to reach areas, something that's got a longer wand. And so this sort of stuff is great. They do have a lot more complicated ones that cost a lot more, but a really basic one, even this one, lost its hip, still works great. And so the goal is you don't clean it around the machine, because you've basically removed the protection from it getting into the machine. So you would take it over yonder, clean it, and then bring it back to the machine and reassemble it. And then the next thing I would do is top off your fuel, make sure you're on a level surface. A lot of these, and see there's some pressure because it's been sitting around. But a lot of these have a way to hold this. If you don't have this, be conscious of where you put this, the cap, because it will potentially put harmful things into your gas tank, which could clog it. And why am I having issues? Well, because stuff got in there. So another thing that I recommend in that kind of first step while you have the compressor out is just clean off your machine before you even open it. And then that way, all the debris is gone, and it's a lot cleaner to begin with. So I guess now really to how to start a two-stroke engine, the actual process of starting it up. So there's a choke. A choke adjusts the amount of air and fuel ratio. And usually there's a full choke and there's a half choke or a quarter choke or a third choke, depending on the machine. Two strokes usually have basically an on and an off for the choke, and then a middle. And I don't know if it's exactly 50% or what. But in this example, you go full choke all the way. And then you would prime it, because that's the next thing. This one doesn't tell me how many times to press it, but it does have a little symbol for pressing it. So I'm gonna go 3 times, and I'm not actually gonna start anything in here because that would just be annoying. But then the process would be to take the machine, keep it away from anybody's face, your car, anything you don't wanna get hit by those things, and then go ahead and be in a stable position where you can pull on the starter cord and give it a start. Now, it might not go the first time. On this one, what's gonna happen is it's gonna pop back to halfway or all the way. And I would, again, kind of don't prime it again, but just put it back under the choke. And by the third or fourth time, you're usually starting it. And this can usually just be because the gasoline isn't all the way, the fuel mixture, excuse me, is not all the way through into where it's actually in the chamber combusting. And then at that point, it'll pop, once it fires on, this will pop to halfway, and then it's running. With this one, that thing likes to spin. I don't know why, it just does. And so I let it warm up kind of like that with the choke halfway for a little bit. You'll be able to audibly hear kind of a change in the pitch of the engine, or the motor, excuse me. And then from there, for this one, you can just pull the safety and then the throttle. On this one, the safety is here, and the throttle is here. For two-stroke engines, you're always going to be pulling your throttle 100%. There's no 25% or 50%. It's on or off. And that's just based on the efficiency of the motor. Technically, you can sort of have a little less, but it doesn't actually benefit you in any way. Now, for this, depending on the type of work you're doing, you might not want it fully spinning, so then it would be like full throttle, let it die down, full throttle, let it die down. But that's kind of a nuance of using it in there. Once it's warmed up, yes.
For the choke,
Yep.
is it adding more fuel? Like, what is the function of a choke?
It's changing the ratio of fuel. Oh, yes, the question was, what is the choke doing? And is it adding more fuel or less fuel or more oxygen or less oxygen? And from what I understand, it's adding more fuel, but I'm not 100% sure, because all I know is the choke is what helps me get it started. I also know that the choke is not the way you want to run it, so it's not optimal. So if you want to clarify on that.
I don't know. I think you're right where it adds more fuel into the system for a minute, and then you have to turn it off or turn off the extra fuel before it chokes out.
Right. So turning it off after a minute or two or even less is the right way to go, because then you're not having that improper ratio. So
you can kind of hear it, right?
Yep. And we can fire up the BCS outside after this, and you kind of be able to hear it, and it's a patterning thing. So if you like drums, it's definitely a drum solo you could get into. Yes.
The choke also chokes the air from getting in as well. Okay. So probably more fuel and less air is what I've heard before.
So more fuel and less air at the same time in one little device. And then obviously it can change that ratio if you're part of the way in there. And so when it functions, in that way, we know that this machine will be operating as efficiently as possible. a few things that I do to make sure that I'm as efficient as I can be, because the machine wants to be as efficient as it can be, is to keep the fuel on me, well, not on me in person, but closer to me so I'm not running all the way back. Make sure I'm full from the beginning, and make sure I got enough string and I have extra string for this specific machine. And from there, you should be able to get a decent amount of work done and be efficient with it. And then in terms of safety after using it or in between, depending on the time of year, we had a really big fire not too long ago. So these little things can create a lot of heat, and so you want to be really conscious about yourself as well as putting this down into the grass or any debris that might be there, because the exhaust area of every machine will get hot. And then of course, if you've used something and you know what it normally sounds like, but then it doesn't sound like that anymore, it's kind of a time to kind of figure out, is it a bearing? Is it something else? If it's shooting sparks, probably not good, even though this is behind you, so I don't know how you would ever know. And then for this specific brand, for this specific one, that's the process. I know that my chainsaw actually has numbered ones, so it kind of gives you a little bit more of a hint about the route to go. So if we're gonna, do you have any more questions on operating it, starting it?
Will you show us?
Sorry. Did you say it into the mic?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Can you, or will you be showing us, like, actually taking the air filter out of this machine?
This machine I can, if that's how we want it to spend the time.
I don't know.
To me, I think that each machine has a manual. It's going to tell you how to do it. Okay. So showing you on this machine, unless you got the exact one, the FS91R, by still, is not going to be exactly the same. And so my hope is that if that's what makes most sense for you guys to learn, we can definitely do it. I can show you what kind of tools we might need. But I feel that if we go over the basics, then we're
all good, man.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then if there's time at the end, because I speak so fast, maybe we can go through a couple of these things. Putting a two-stroke away for the winter. So I would say we're going to hang it up. We're not going to use it anymore. I definitely wouldn't want to leave it in the truck bed for too long. I wouldn't want to leave it out in any elements. And ideally, it's not going to get hit by anything or have damage that gets done to it, or really any moisture in this area. So in the barn, shop, garage, great place to store it. What I do is I would fill with a non-ethanol appropriate fuel mixture, the fuel tank, and then depending on how you operate, you might pull that air filter and clean it off again just so you're ready to roll. But most likely, it's going to get left just as it was, and so you just have to then know, okay, I want to use it again. What is the starting process and how do we get there? It is something that you can save for your cold day in the winter to kind of like, okay, hey, let's go through. Let's figure out what we want to do. For the machine. And then from there, what else would I do to put it away? Basically, yeah, keep it safe and then keep it hung up somewhere where it's not going to get damaged, not going to get water, and be able to fill that fuel tank. Howdy.
Question over here? Or you first, Amy?
In the sub-zero temperatures, is there anything to add to the gas oil mixture when you're storing it for the winter?
So that's a great question. So there are products you can buy. This is one of them. It works for both 2 and 4-stroke engines, and it has a ratio. This little bottle treats 80 gallons, so it's going to be kind of difficult to get the appropriate ratio. So I'm sure you can find out a lot of different ways that people want to do it. I prefer just to use non-ethanol gasoline from the very beginning, whether that's purchasing this type of fuel, which is already non-ethanol and has the oil in it, or going to, at least in Longmont, the Murphys on Hover and 66, they have non-ethanol fuel. The airport does as well. And that is stabilized. That's basically going to be stabilized for the winter. And by filling up your fuel tank entirely, you've reduced the amount of oxygen contact, and so then the degradation becomes even less. And you can add it. I, at this point, haven't, because it seems like I'm always pulling tools out and using them. And when it comes to things that I don't put non-ethanol fuel in, like a vehicle that I might not use, that's where I'm more likely to put this in there, because I'm not buying non-ethanol fuel on the regular. Or if I know I'm going to put it away, then I would actually make an effort to do that. And of course, everything's time and place. We had plenty of time for October, November, and December that we wanted to use things, so they didn't go away. And I guess, just a bit on safety, more safety stuff. Even if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it is good to have one of these on you. You can stop little fires from turning into something big. They have different ways to mount them, and you just have to be conscious that your empty and full gauge is in the full. Otherwise, it's probably not going to do you any good. And they're relatively cheap. So if you're got a little ATV or your truck or something or vehicle, and you're going to be out and you're on your own, it would be great to have one of those. So any other questions?
You've talked. You've talked about the importance of non-ethanol fuel. What happens if you use ethanol fuel and leave it sitting?
So ethanol fuel has ethanol in it. Usually it's less than 10%. Depending on where you buy from, it might be upwards of 15%. You never really know. And ethanol is a corn-based product, and so it oxidizes in a way that makes it gummy. And so it's no longer, basically the spark plug and other bits and pieces, fuel filter, can get clogged up. And so now you don't have the appropriate full flow of fuel to get to your to the chamber for it to create the appropriate size explosion. So if you run something like that and then you use a fuel stabilizer, but you want to make sure it gets all the way through into your fuel lines and into your injectors, because that helps sort of cancel it out in a way. I don't know what the chemical process is and how it stabilizes it, but non-ethanol fuel or pure gas is not that much more expensive, especially when we're talking about little machines. Running cars on it is a different story. Anything else on two-stroke?
So where do you find non-ethanol gasoline?
So there's a website that I've used, especially when going on motorcycle trips, because it's also something you'd want in your motorcycle. And I will look it up when we have a little minute. I can't think of it right now, but typically it's a blue handle at the pump if there is, and they usually also advertise it on the sign. I've found that like here we have 2 locations within 5 miles, but then in Boulder there's none. So I had to come up, when I was in Boulder, I had to come up to Longmont. But airports, and then a lot of places that have ATV traffic and motorcycle traffic or off-road vehicles will have it as well. So in this area, since we're all in this area, the Vance Brand Airport has it. I found it a little bit difficult to buy there because the timing wasn't great. But then the Highway 66 in Hover, there's a Murphy's Express there that has it. I just saw all of the handles covered in the out of service, so I don't know if they're out or something. Anything else?
Also, when do you turn the choke off?
So
How do you know when it turns off?
on this machine, the choke automatically turns off when you press your safety and use your throttle.
Okay.
So that's this machine. I think most of them are like that, and it's, but that's something that I'm not 100% sure on.
So you start it, and then once it's running, you shut the choke off.
Exactly. And so they can all be finicky, and there's a lot of reasons that they can be, but by using non-ethanol gas, cleaning your air filter, and not letting chunks of anything get into your fuel tank, you're creating the best environment possible for that to run optimally, and reducing any of those future problems, because I know I can't get my hands in there to clean any clogs out, so again, refer to your manual. All right, so we're going to move to the 4-stroke unless there's more questions on 2-stroke.
I have a question. Does it matter, does it matter like what direction you store things in?
That's a great question. I would definitely try to keep it so that the seal of the tank is up. In this case, I store it like this, and it is sideways, but it's also designed such that it's at the high, it creates a high point within it. And so for this one, it's fine like this. So 4-stroke engines are different in, again, the way that they have to be in pretty much this orientation to function. And then the second biggest difference is you're going to have a fuel tank and then a place to put your oil. And the oil is what lubricates the engine. It's the same thing when you have a fuel oil mixture, but because of the way that this functions, they're actually separate. And if you have oil in your fuel, you're burning it, and that's not great, and you have some issues. So the same thing applies. We've got a machine that might be dirty, so we want to make sure that we have a clean air filter. So we would take our wand, and for this one's nice because this is where you can actually get better access into the points, clean it off first, and then for this one's actually easy. I can do it by hand. So we'll pop this guy, and then we've got our fuel, or our air filter. And I'm gonna actually leave it on there for now, just because there's so much there. But this actually has 2 bits and pieces. So you got your pre-filter and your actual filter. So if you're rocking something like this and you only have this part, you might want to look in the user manual, look up if it's supposed to have an exterior filter. They also have a process for these filters such that you actually put a little bit of oil on the outside of this because it catches more microparticles. And the same thing, this is operating in potentially a really dusty environment. So the other thing with the filter is that you want to be blowing in the opposite direction of the way that the air normally flows to expel the material out, but you can kind of go from any direction. In this one, it's the same thing, it's just in a circle. So to start this one, so we're going to check a few more things because this is a lot more complicated. This has a lot more controls, and depending on the type of engine, right? It's a 2-stroke engine, but now we have all these added bits and pieces. It has a transmission, which powers the PTO. It's got drive. It's got brakes, and so for this one to operate, it's the same, but we want to make sure that all of our controls are in the safe position. And so for this one, it's going to be same symbology is going to kind of tell us what is going on. User manual will tell you how to do that. This one actually has a battery and a key, and if that battery wasn't dead, the key could start it. However, just because that battery's dead doesn't mean we can't start it because it has a pull cord that you can also use. To make that work, you actually have to turn it to run, to on, which again is going to be just our vertical line symbol. It won't start because the electrical system is not allowing it to pass if it's in the off. So that's one thing. Sometimes there is, instead of a key, it's actually just a little knob. And so your specific machine will kind of show you that. On this one, this has multiple ways of killing the machine. And one of them is by just turning the switch off, and now it's not going to run. It also has a switch up here that acts independently of that. However, they both have to be on to run. Let's see, before I go on too far. So our fuel, on this one, it doesn't need to have oil in it, but I still do recommend non-ethanol fuel because it will not gum up over time, and the small machines like it better. Actually, all vehicles like it better, but corn's subsidized, so woohoo, ethanol. So level surface, no debris. Again, if you have a cap that doesn't have its chain anymore, make sure it doesn't get nasty stuff on it. And top yourself off with the appropriate type of fuel. They do make BCSs that are diesel, so be aware. Usually there is when it is diesel, it's either a green cap or it'll say diesel, but that's not always guaranteed. So before you just start adding anything to anything, you want to know that the container that you're pouring from is actually the material you think it is. And I have found that there are a lot of times when a red can will have diesel in it. And with a bit of experience filling up diesel versus gasoline-based fuels, you will know that there's a smell difference and a look difference, but it's kind of hard to determine. So again, I recommend if you're running diesel and non-ethanol type gasoline and a fuel mixture, you have separate containers for all of them. It's a little clunky, but it really stops anything. Because if you were to put diesel in here or an oil fuel mixture, what you have to do is not start it. And you have to drain it, pull your fuel filter out, pull the tank out, clean it all out, and put it all back together. Because if any of that gets into the chamber, it's going to create an explosion that's either way too powerful or not powerful enough and just cause issues down the line. This applies to all engines. So knowing what you're... Yes?
Would you repeat what you just
Sure.
said?
So I guess I could, like, how do I say this? I think I wrote it on here. Basically, fuel is not all the same. So you have gas, which is gasoline, and this can be 85, E85, 95, or 97, you know, all the different types of there. This can also be non-ethanol and non. And then you have diesel, and I really am not good at writing on an angle. D-I-E-S-E-L. So these are both fuels, but they are not the same. So when we refer to things, I don't want to tell somebody, if somebody says to get gas, I get gasoline. I don't get diesel. Now it's a kind of a nuanced thing that if you know the vehicle and you know the person, it might not be a problem. But if you send your intern out to get fuel and you don't specify, they might come back with the wrong product. So within this category is also going to be the oil added fuel. And this, again, this product is an all-in-one, or you can buy it where you mix it yourself. Does that answer the question? Or back to just the pumping it out?
It was, I think, it's okay, it's fine. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, question.
Yeah.
What colors are most common for the different fuels in terms of the gas tank?
The gas
Or
tank.
sorry, it's the fuel tanks usually have different colors, right?
Usually it's red. And usually this is either green or yellow. However, I've seen fuel tank caps that are diesel that are black. And they say diesel on them. And I've also seen ethanol or gasoline-based products that don't have any color associated with them. So when I see a product in this can, if it doesn't have any writing on it, I'm going to believe that it is a gasoline-based product. Now, if it has writing, that really helps. And then just to complicate matters, for some reason, if you had a tank like that, but it was for diesel, it would be yellow. But when you go to the pump, it's a green handle. So don't ask me why, but they do it this way. Dave. And Mark.
Sorry, quick question, Chris. So visually, the fuel itself, you said there is a visual, like if you're experienced, you have a visualization between gasoline and diesel. And I think to this lady's question, putting diesel in a gasoline engine, that's when you could screw it up. So I'm not sure if that's where you were going, but visually, what is the visual difference between the two fuels?
Right, and you're not going to be able to tell when it's looking down in the hole right there. So there's going to be a smell difference, which of course don't go sticking your hand in there and do the whole safety wafting. And the best way I can describe it is, well, so there's three types: fuel additive, oil additive one. In this case, this one is red, and that's unlike a lot of them. But that makes it even more complicated. So then if I were to say have a clear container of diesel or gasoline, most likely the gasoline is going to be the clearest of them. And then the diesel is going to be the cloudiest. Now, it might, and it's usually more of a blue cloudy. However, if you're on a farm and you get non-road tax diesel, aka dyed diesel, it's red. So you also so basically it's very specific to which one it is, and most small engines aren't going to be diesel, and if you do have one that's diesel, I like to write a lot of stuff in different places so I know what it is. I wrote air filter here, and they make these great, I think this is the type, they make these great little silver pens, and it's kind of like from Michael's or in the art department. But they usually hold up better than a Sharpie, and you can get these ones that are a bit shiny. So fuel is complicated. And so we want to be very sure what our machine needs and what we're getting it, and make sure it's good. One of my habits is actually to only use the cans that are appropriate. And if I were on a job site, I didn't have a diesel can, but I needed diesel, I would make myself buy the $40 can and do that, and because, okay, it's a cost, but it's going to save me hundreds or thousands of dollars if I blow an engine or if I have to get a fuel tank pumped, because depending on the machine, this one's quite accessible. Other machines have them way tucked in and they got to pull everything out. So be very conscious about what the machine needs and making sure that you have it marked out to what's going to go into it. I kind of love these red rags because they're colorful. They fit in your side pocket really well, but they're also good for cleaning stuff up, including your hands. So when I'm filling a tank, sometimes you spill it, so I would actually kind of dab that up with it, or if you've got oil or whatnot. But if you did have a big spill, I'd recommend taking the machine outside and letting it sit for a while before you turn it on, because you could have something that pooled in there somewhere. And so that's just kind of a note on safety. So any other questions on fuel while we're there? All good? Awesome. So we're going to know what type of fuel we're going to have, and we're going to use the right one. And so back to starting a 4-stroke engine. And so this one has a battery attached to it. Assuming that if we were pulling this out for the very first time, I would have taken the, before I was going to use it, probably the day or two before, popped these things off, and actually I noticed a problem here. See that? See how loose that is? That's a major problem. And the other one's also loose. I'm noticing that they don't have, they're just not tightened. So this is maybe why that battery doesn't work. It's not charging. So, we've been getting away with it, as good farmers do, with bypassing it. In this instance, it's probably not much of an issue. But so pulling it out of storage, you can get a battery tender or a battery charger, and there is a difference. But having one of these hooked up for 24 hours in advance usually is good enough to get it cranking. We're going to fix that later. So assuming that we're good, we're going to put our safety caps on. And if you looked in the user manual, you would actually see that there is a shroud here that's missing that would help keep it clean. This BCS didn't come with one when I purchased it used, and I haven't yet to figure out what that number is and order it. So I'm going to be extra conscious about not letting this one sit in the rain or anything like that because the battery is exposed. So now, the one thing that we didn't check on the 2-stroke is oil level. And now, because we have a fuel compartment or a fuel tank and an area where the oil is, it's not really a tank, it's a reservoir more. We're going to go ahead and check that. And so on this one, it is way tucked down under here. And this one actually has two. It's going to be this little guy right here. And so this has to be on a level surface. And then you're going to pop that off, and this is easy to check. Oh, let's see, hasn't been done in a while. And this is similar, see, might be overfilled or not level. So I don't know if anybody can see that, but I started dripping some oil. So it might be over full. This might not be level. I know that this is actually, there's a slight issue with the way the BCS snowblower hooks up to this one, so I think that might be the issue, or we potentially have something bigger that's an issue. But assuming that that was good, we would, and actually that's probably what it is. And so I haven't gone through and obviously checked all this stuff because it's been sitting, haven't needed to use it. And so the other thing, so if we were taking this out of storage, the other thing that we would go through and check is the spark plug. And some people like to just replace spark plugs and filters at the same time, just because it's possible, and it'll give you good firing and also good air cleaning capacity. So the user manual will tell you what thickness. If you can't see it, but there's this tiny little piece of metal that L hooks over it, and then a gap, and that's the spark plug gap. And I will draw it up here real quick. And the spark plug gap is set based on what your user manual says. And so that is basically, then you got all your threads. So this gap right here is adjustable. You can push on it, you can pry on it. They have these little guys that tell you a little bit, the fractions of an inch, I believe they're in, and you just kind of slide it along. And this one currently is sitting at the narrowest it can be, 0.025. And so if I were to pull up the manual on that, I would find that that is most likely not the right gap, because this isn't the right spark plug for this machine. But I don't have a spare one for this one. So if you don't do that, you can look at it. This one is obviously shiny and clean. If you have corrosion or chunks missing of the ceramic, because that can happen, I would definitely recommend getting a replacement. And this is the part that is in the fuel tank, and this is the part that comes out to your spark plug wire, and that's what goes to either your starter or your pull chain to get it going. And then it continues to fire from there. So assuming these things are all good, we're going to figure out and make sure, depending on the machine, that the PTO is not engaged, the drive is not engaged, so we are in neutral. This one actually has a parking brake, so we're going to engage the parking brake. We are then going to kind of start from 0 in terms of the engine itself, so double checking neutral, double checking that the PTO is off, or disengaged really. We're going to turn it to the on position. We know this battery is dead, or as we know now, not well connected. And then this one, and some of them are very different. This one has another lever that is another switch, and it actually has a position where it has this little guy, and that would be the RPM symbol with the start arrow for cranking it. And if anybody has seen when they start old cars or really, really old airplanes, they actually have to throw the propeller or turn a crank to get all the cylinders and everything moving in there. So that's why it kind of has like a motion like that. Might also be because keys turn and turn things on, but it depends on how far back you want to go. So on this machine, there's also a throttle. So I'm going to make sure that that throttle is not all the way up. This one goes all the way to there. So I'm going to go about a third of the way, quarter of the way, just because if it's all the way down, it might just be starving it of fuel and it wouldn't get there anyway. And if it's also all the way up and accidentally something is engaged, like the drive or the PTO, it's going to throw it in, and that can cause issues. So this also has a choke, and I did not write the choke symbol up there, but we'll do that now. So it's something like that. And this one also has a choke full and choke half. However, this one does not automatically set it to anywhere. You are entirely responsible for that. So while we're checking the choke, we can also check that the fuel tank, fuel line is open. And so that's the classic, everybody has that on their car. That's the fuel tank. Oh, it's on, now I gotta go get some gas. Otherwise we're gonna have to walk a ways. So that is on. I have a habit of leaving them on. If you have a carb issue, you might turn it off so it doesn't leak all over the place. I've also had that happen. So depending on the state of your machine, that might be something that can keep it from leaking fuel. If you find that you always come back to an empty tank, is to turn your fuel off. So back to starting, we've got our choke. In this case, the choke is going to come all the way on. And then from there, we're, in this case, gonna pull the cord, and let it sit. And again, if you like drumming or you want to have a drum solo, kind of think of it like that. It'll start to change. And as it starts to change, we will basically dial it back a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. Now, if you go all the way and it dies, okay, try starting it from halfway, because you don't really need it to go all the way. Now, sometimes you've gone through this whole process and, oh, what is it? What is it? Well, go back and start from the beginning. Do you have fuel? Are all of your off switches on? Okay. Are any of your safeties not engaged, or are they engaged such that they're stopping it from starting? Some of these, like this one, you have to pull this one up, then push this one down for the machine to be put into gear, or for the PTO to be changed. Now, that being said, this is a power safe model. There are other models that operate differently. So from that process, we'll just run it really quick. We've cleaned our air filter, filled up with the appropriate type of fuel. We've made sure that we have air in our tires, and then we're gonna put all of these different switches that might turn the machine off into the run position. And then we turn the choke all the way on. We make sure that our fuel is on. We take our throttle and put it about 25% to 30% engaged, and then we go ahead and start the machine. From there, you let it warm up, and I wouldn't recommend warming it up in a room like this because it's not good for your health. And so from there, we can go outside and start it and listen to that, but basically you would dial it back, until it's just running smooth. Sometimes you can, for this one, you also have a little bit of a nuance in where this one goes, because it has a start position and then a run position. And so from there, you should be good to then operate that piece of machinery. What else? So any questions on all of that?
How important is it to have clean oil, or how often should you clean or replace your oil? And is it easy on these machines? On
these ones, it's really easy. It's a mess, but it's really easy. Everything's a mess. I would say that it is definitely important. It's definitely something that you can push off, but what can happen is it can be sludgy. So if you use it in a colder temperature, it won't actually lubricate the entire way, and you may never notice. But it is something that will cause extra wear and tear that's not necessary. I know people with motorcycles that have smaller engines as well, it's all the time. Every year, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you put 10 miles on it or the appropriate number to a fuel change, and that's just for longevity of the engine, because that's usually the most expensive part. Depends on what you're talking about, but
so change your oil often.
Yeah, and the manual will tell you what that is. And if you have a log and you have a file, you can kind of write down when you did it, when your mechanic did it, or interns or employees did it. Anybody else on 2-stroke or 4-stroke?
Question on the air filter. So this one has kind of the 2-part. You mentioned, Chris, that you can put oil. That's a manual recommended adhesive? Like if you're going to put oil on the outside filter, and then is it motor oil, or is there a different type of oil that you would apply?
So the instructions that I've read were to put motor oil on the outer layer, wring it out, so it's not actually wet, but it's dry, but it has a sheen to it, and if you were to touch it, it would get a tiny little bit of oil on your hands. But I would refer to the manual to see if they say to do that, because there might be something different, a new technology. These engines have been around for some time, and so the old guys might say it's definitely the thing to do. But that's what I've read in the manual, and it was clean motor oil. Don't use used motor oil. Anybody else?
We have a gas-powered tiller, and it was recommended to me that I drain the gas or run it out before the end of the year. Is that related to is that like assuming that I used an ethanol-based gasoline?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have, it's a 4-stroke, not 2-stroke?
Yes.
It has an oil tank.
Okay. So then that is another option, is to run it completely dry. But I would even say at that point, you might as well get a half gallon of non-ethanol fuel and run that through as the very last thing, because you're never going to get all of it out. But that is another solution to keep things from gumming up.
Or the fuel stabilizer, right?
Or the fuel stabilizer, absolutely. So definitely a few ways to put them away. And what's the best option is going to depend on your operation. And then kind of the same way to put it, that you take it out, the opposite is to put it away. So if you're going to go with a fuel stabilizer, or if you're going to go with non-ethanol fuel, or if you're going to drain your tank, you would go through that process. And then again, these are going to be much happier if they're kept out of the elements. Even in a shed, even under a tarp is better. This blue used to be a lot bluer. Probably you can tell by right here, just UV does a lot of damage to plastic and rubber. So your tires will be a lot happier. So, any other questions on 4-stroke?
I guess warming it up. So for warming up, it probably just depends on the machine, and you will kind of like notice over time what it needs. Or is there any like recommendation for how long?
I think that it definitely can depend, and it can depend on your temperature. The shop out there, or the workshop out there, gets quite cold. And so you've got all that metal in there, it might take longer to really get warm. And so 30 seconds, probably a summertime type of warm up, 2 minutes, maybe a wintertime type of warm up. And then from there, even once it's warm at that 2 minutes, I wouldn't take the throttle and just jam it. I would kind of go halfway, and then 3/4, and then into full mode if you wanted it to be that high. Yeah.
On this under 4-stroke, it's number 5 and number 6. Turn the fuel to on position, then turn the choke to on position. Can you explain the difference between those two and their functions?
Sure. So the choke is what changes the air and fuel ratio going into the engine. The fuel switch, or the on-off for the fuel, is actually like a shutoff for a hose that stops it from going from the tank and continuing into the engine.
We're talking about 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines. Why are they called 2-stroke or 4-stroke engines?
It has to do with the way that a 2-stroke engine fires and completes one rotation with one firing, whereas a 4-stroke takes 2 rotations to complete a full set of the cylinders going down and back and down and back. And that's most likely due to the number of cylinders that are potentially in it. And so that's my understanding. Anything else on the specifics of the 4-stroke engine? So I did on the next page do a bit that was basically kind of like basic problems, easy solutions, and a few little harder ones in there. And these are kind of common stuff that can go wrong. And these machines don't think for us. I mean, so we kind of have to walk through these processes, go all the way back, make sure we're checking all the things so that it's something, oh, the fuel filter or the fuel valve was shut off, so that's why we're not getting anything, or the battery's not connected, or it's dead. And so getting into checking some more of the complicated aspects of it kind of is just a diagnosis process, and it gets a lot more complicated from there. So I've been mobile for my shop in the truck kit pretty much my whole life, so it's always kind of bits and pieces that I can grab. But having open-ended wrenches along that are both metric and SAE, the longer sockets are really nice because sometimes the bolt's sticking out or it's hard to reach, as well as the extenders. And then of course, This kit has some pieces that have been replaced because I broke them, but I didn't just let it sit. And then I've also got one tiny one that I've hidden in here because I needed that one size that one time. And luckily I found a place to put it without buying a whole extra kit. Something that happens with the machines that you work on, you end up buying the tools that you need for that machine. You could go ahead and try to get everyone, but I would recommend that you have basically the specifics of what you need and that you use your friend the adjustable as little as possible, because this is known to strip nuts and bolts and cause issues. I also recommend that if it's a 1-inch bolt, you use a 1-inch wrench and not a metric that's close enough, because otherwise you'll end up using your vice grips way too often, and then eventually there's no more metal left to grab. Something that I've found in my line of work is that these sockets are not like the sockets in here. Not because of size, well, somewhat because of size, but not because it's metric or SAE. These ones are meant to go on my handy dandy half-inch impact driver. And this thing is really nice when you don't want to have to try to crank it yourself, or when you're trying to break things free. They have ones that are battery powered, they have ones that are plug-in, they have ones that are air powered. If you're not doing a ton of big stuff, you don't really need this, and you can actually get away with your normal impact driver and a set that has an adapter to go from this type of chuck to this one I believe is 3/8. And again, these ones are impact rated. If you use a non-impact rated with your impact driver of either size, it's not gonna last long. So speaking of where to get tools, I go to Harbor Freight, not all the time, but some of the time. So there are some things there that are worth buying, and then there are other things that because I'm gonna use it a lot more, I don't wanna buy something like that from there. So I've gone with the Blue Makitas because that's just kind of where I've gone, but I'm not gonna buy the Harbor Freight brand because I use them a lot. If I was gonna use it 3, 4, 5 times a year, I might consider going with that brand. So in that same light, the wrenches and things that you can get of the bigger size, you can get them at Harbor Freight. And if you're not using them that often, it's not as much of an issue. So any questions on SAE wrenches and open-ended and that sort of stuff? Dave?
What does SAE represent?
Don't ask me that.
All right.
Like standard, stupid American.
Engineering.
It's some standardization though. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It means 1-inch, 1/8, 1/12, 1/16, fun things. Yeah. Instead of millimeters and centimeters. So I don't know, sorry. All I know is they're different. And even though it seems like it's fitting, it's not gonna work in the long run.
Chris, I have a question. You've got a lot of great tools there, obviously. Some beginner, some more advanced. If you were going to tell somebody to get a starter kit, something to start with, would you recommend that black case with wrenches and?
Yeah, this one's been really good for me, and I kind of grown from there when I've needed the larger or different sizes. If you get one of these and it has metric in it, get 10 millimeters. If it doesn't have 10 millimeter, it's not worth getting. Anything auto-based, you're gonna have a 10 millimeter, and if it's not in your kit, you've wasted your money.
So you can pretty much fix everything if you have one of those kits.
If you have that and an adjustable and a vice grips, you can fix anything. Okay. Oh, no wait, we forgot the one thing. We need duct tape and PB blaster, and then we're good to go. This is another thing, if you notice that something has corrosion on it, it's rusty, it's been outside, hit it with this 2-3 days before, and maybe even each day coming up to the point when you want to break it free. This is PB Blaster. And WD-40 works similarly. There are other brands out there. I've got their marketing got me, so it's what I've been going with for a long time now. So in terms of like a beginner's kit too, or starting out kit, definitely if you have the SAE and the metric, you're kind of going to be able to be in best of both worlds. Now, it's also possible to look at the very detailed breakdown sheet that they have of all the parts on your machine, and you can tell if it's SAE or metric. And then you kind of know, okay, I want a really big complicated metric kit, or I want, half and half or whatnot. This has definitely gotten me far enough in a lot of ways. I've added another little bit of a kit, which was when I upgraded to a double battery charger. I started leaving my battery charger in the truck just so that I didn't have one. This guy's got hearing protection because sometimes things are just too loud. Wire strippers that I don't think made it back into the right place from a use, and then also a variety of funnels because they can always be useful, as well as string. This is where my little level has been. Good to know. And then at one point, I guess I was using one of these and put it back in here. And so your kit kind of grows as you work through different problems. And as long as you don't leave it on the tailgate and your tailgate down, it'll stay with you. I lost one of these. I have no idea where it went. Did somebody take it out of the back of the truck, or did I leave it next to the road and drive away? No idea. So I've had 2 of these, unfortunately. And then,
What do you do about strip bolts?
stripped bolts. So with like a hex head.
You just got a thing on here. It's called Easy Out.
So, right. So depending on what type of stripped bolt it is and where it is in the machine, you might have to use an easy out, and it's basically something that I don't know where mine is right now. I'm sorry. And it is a drill that, actually, I bet you it's in that one over there. So it's a multi-step process, but it basically helps you get purchase on an old bolt or nut. Probably not actually going to work on a nut though, as I say that, because you have to drill into it, and then it labels what size it's for. But basically, get the big one out. See, this is what happens when you open things upside down. This is not going to be put into a drill, but you would make a hole big enough for this to grab, and then this, when you turn it, forces its way in further because it's pitched. It will continue to go. Now, if you have a stripped bolt and you haven't used PB Blaster, you're only making it harder for yourself. And also depending on where it is, if it's somewhere like a fuel tank bolt or something like that, you want to be really conscious because you might create a big mess by drilling a hole in it and going too far. And so this, I would say, is on the moderate to difficult type of thing, mainly because you're using a drill. Now you have to drill into metal, and then that can cause its own problems. But I do recommend, if you want to get down into that, it is a nice kit to have because it does help you. But 2 things I would do before I would pull the easy out is hit it with PB Blaster, but even before I tried it and it didn't work, don't crank on it so hard that you strip it. Go, this isn't right. Instead of using if you're using one of these, you're not in a great place. But you can also get like a pipe and extend it. I've got a ridiculously huge one. There's also, depending on what you have in your kit, you can get away with getting a little more leverage. Sometimes like this, however, you're much more likely to break your knuckles or bust them at least, depending on what other metal chunks are around. So I would say, first off, get the very appropriate size for it, and then, so don't use an adjustable. Spray it with PB Blaster, let it sit. Spray it with PB Blaster, let it sit, and then get a longer device on it and making sure that you're the appropriate size. Because if it's a nut, you're probably going to need vice grips. An easy out isn't going to do anything. And I have some somewhere, and sometimes the only thing that's going to be your friend is going to be your Sawzall and your metal blade, and you make sure that you don't do too much damage to whatever it's holding on to, and then you can pop the head off and then hopefully have the ability to get it out. Heat is also something that can help break rust bonds, but it's not, use it with caution. because you might be heating something up that's gasoline, or it might be something that has plastic or rubber that would be deformed by that. Anything else on that the kit? I guess I got a lot more things here.
We've got a question here.
Yes.
So, if someone does not have an air compressor, how would you go about cleaning the air filter?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's the best thing, and it definitely doesn't give you the best PSI. But as you can see, I didn't buy the Makita brand because I was a little bit on a budget that day. So I got Ryobi because it was, go to a Home Depot center aisle sort of deal. But this can help. You can also, and even though it says it in the manual, some of them say, some of them don't, you can tap them off. Now, if you start slamming on it like that, you're going to probably puncture it and cause lots of problems. But if you just give it a little bit, okay, that's better than nothing, right? And this one, at least, you could bend and kind of, a little something is better than nothing.
Chris, can I add something?
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
There's also a product called Air in a Can.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever had one of
That's
those.
helpful, especially if you're not near electricity. If you have a couple air in a cans, you can
That's a good
you
point.
can use a.
So I need a bigger kit?
You just need another can of PB Blaster. Only it's air.
Exactly. Yep. So then with air compressors, so this is in the shop, but also you can mount them to vehicles, and it's a complicated process. So you can, if you really want to go that far to have that much pressure, you can do that. You can also buy a little 12 volt, and this is where I got one from Harbor Freight, and it has saved me hours of time. You just have to be very careful to not burn yourself on it and to follow the instructions because it will overheat, especially when you're trying to get it to 80 PSI. But if you're just going to 30, it's great. The thing that I did buy was an extension for the 12 volt. So it plugs into the cigarette lighter, or they're no longer cigarette lighters, and then it goes out, and then it has the capacity to fill tires with the normal Schrader type valve. If you had a Presta that you wanted to fill, you could get an adapter. And that's the bike mechanic in me talking. So the other thing that you want if you're gonna try to fill tires is a pressure gauge. And that'll tell you if your tires are low. That's this guy. And you wanna make sure that you get one that's for the appropriate range of pressure that you're going to be using, because the one that goes to 50 isn't good for the tires that need to go to 80. You'll have a poor reading. And then in my truck, I always keep one of the filler valves with the construction style connection. And that's a whole other conversation of different connectors for that. But normally, if you aren't a mechanic, you utilize the construction style. Or maybe it's because I did construction first, that's why I have that. And it's just continued down that path. Two other things that we'll keep on the tire trend, sorry. So if you have a tire that's small like this and you can take it off and it just keeps going flat, but maybe it's 2 days or 2 months in between, you can pull it off because it's small enough. Maybe don't use your bathtub, but use a vessel of water, plunge it in there, and see where the bubbles are coming from. If you've got bubbles coming from your valve stem, most likely it's a failed valve stem core, and it's the tiniest little piece. And there's the special tool that can help remove them. And so again, you don't want to do this if there's lots of pressure on the machine. So if you can either pull it off or jack it up, this can help. We had one of those on my truck the other day. And it was just kind of like, tried everything and kept going flat. And then you could also hear. So if you don't always have headphones in, your ears will give you a lot of information on your machines, and how they're doing. So that's something that is often overlooked, is the ability to change your valve core stem out. Awesome. So kind of in that same little area that I have my tire pressure gauge and the ability to fill up as well as change out cores, I have, and it's actually my driver's side door, just because it's right there. I keep a painter's tool that has all these little different functions on it, because I've just found that sometimes you just need a little bit of pressure in somewhere. Mainly, this is for my plow connections for the electrical on and off, but it's just something that I found that like you can not do much damage with one of these, whereas you can either rip your fingernails off or break the plastic that's there depending on what the things are, as well as it does have a couple different little functions, as well as the ability to open your beer or just bubbly water, depending on your fancy. And then the other thing that I found that's really nice is not just a screwdriver, but a screwdriver that has lots of functions. So this one has, I think it's 11 or 12. They all flip around, and they all, not only do they all flip around, but this is one size nut, this is another size nut, this is another size nut, and so it's all very much able to be what you need. I really like this one. Klein is a great electrician's tool. They are a little bit more pricey, and kind of depending on what you need, you might want different things in there. This one has the Phillips as well as a couple small stars, and then the square. I don't think I've ever used the square on this one, but it's definitely something that's nice to have. And I do believe that you could use these different bits as like an Allen key if it was the right size. But I've just found that saved me a lot of time running back and forth. And see, I put it back together the wrong way. Phillips should be out if you want to get OCD with it. And so I don't keep everything in my truck all at once because you can't have everything. So everything that I just talked about is what I have in my kit. So the black SAE open-ended and metric open-ended, as well as the long sockets, short sockets. This red kit stays with me. And this is all based on what I need. These little pins are wonderful when you have them and they're the right size. So I have a couple different kinds and a couple extra ones. And on that note, you should always be using the right size pin. If you put a small pin in the wrong hole, you're going to wall it out, and that's going to create an oval, and then you're compromising the structural integrity of that. So it doesn't matter if it's something small, but when you're talking about, tens of thousands of pounds with big machines, it becomes a big deal. And also, it's the same thing. You'll save yourself 2 hours of driving to wherever to find the right one. And in that note, cotter pins. I haven't actually opened these, but they're there just in case. And so what else do I have in this one? I use chains a lot. So I kind of ways to connect chains so that you have better hoisting capacity. So that lives in the truck. I don't always have one of these, a voltmeter, but the voltmeter does live in the shop, and it's a great way to test your batteries. You can do a lot more with it, and I know Chris will go into the, over there, he'll go into all the details, but it is a nice tool to have. You can get a lot more basic ones. I think somebody must have left this on their tailgate or the back of their truck because I found it on the side of the road. And they didn't leave their number in it, so you can't give it back. And speaking of electrical connections, dielectric grease is your friend, but don't put too much on. But when you have things that are connecting, not battery terminals, but different plugs, trailer plugs, my snowplow plugs, probably the plugs on my tractor for we're talking electrical, this helps make sure that there's a good connection between it. However, it does like to attract dirt. So if you have any caps or anything that when you're not using the machine, put it on. Then it keeps the gunk out. Then you don't have to I just got this kit because I have had issues with electrical connections, and it's got all the cleaners for those connections. But if we don't have to use this because we put our caps on, we're kind of preventing it, the ability to need just one more thing. So in terms of batteries, I'll speak to batteries for a sec, yeah. So batteries, there's different kinds. This type is different than the type in my Makita drill. And so they're gonna behave differently, but the commonality between all types of batteries, whether they're in your phone or in your small machine or anywhere else, is they don't like cold. And so when you store them in a place that isn't cold. Now, cold being anything below 40. Now, this is kind of me being frugal in a way. I don't want to have to buy a $200 battery all the time. So what can I do to extend the life of that battery? If it takes me 5 minutes to pull it out, bring it inside, put it on my trickle charger, know that it's 100% full, and then when I go out to use it in 2-3 weeks, 6 months, I know that it was good. Now, if I'm really good, I'll put it back on the charger right beforehand. So that's kind of with car batteries or the small machine batteries like this, that's the case. And storing any type of battery, you always want to store it full. So you would fully charge it and then store it. And ideally, you're storing it somewhere that's higher than the temperatures at 40 or higher. This room is warmer than 40 right now, but normally it just stays at 40 because that just allows it to, we can keep paint in here and we can keep batteries in here and not worry about the longevity of them. All batteries don't like shock. So if you can not drop them, that will really help their life, whether it's one of these or one of these guys. So that's just kind of my bit on batteries, because I know that battery powered tools are more in, and there's a lot more varieties. And so it's just kind of again, go to the user manual because it'll tell you the specifics, because a lithium ion is going to be different than a deep cell battery, which is going to be different than this little mini, which is probably not totally a deep cell. And it'll kind of tell you what it needs. And so that's just my little storage of batteries bit.
If you cannot store at 40 or above, would you then recommend just disconnecting it after charging it?
Yes. And then potentially, depending on your situation, getting a trickle charger on it monthly, because that will help give it the longest life. Now, that's not easy. And then if the other thing would be that if you can't get it out of the machine or wherever, then you would take the, instead of trying to start it on the coldest part of the day, you would go out when it's nice and warm. You would hopefully have it positioned where it would actually get a little bit warmer, crank it up, and hopefully it starts. If it doesn't start, you can jump it, or they make these little boxes, and this one has pretty much been destroyed because I left it in a garage for too long that was unheated. But it still has a light on it, and I haven't looked into how to recycle it just yet. So if you start it when it's warmer, it has more chance of firing, and then the alternator that's in that system would be able to charge it. And depending on your machine, sometimes idle doesn't charge your battery. So whenever, and even if you're jumping a car, ideally you go from a bigger battery to a smaller battery. So if you're jumping a small Subaru or something, you could use another vehicle that has a similar size or bigger truck. But if you're trying to use a Subaru to jump a diesel truck that has 2 batteries, you're going to have a really hard time, and it might actually deteriorate the life of the smaller car's battery. So that's just something to keep in mind. On the battery note, I have a membership to American Motorcycles of America, I believe is the membership. I get awesome magazines, and I also get great AAA. It's $50 a year or something, and they've come out with the best little battery pack, fired me up, put me on my way, and I didn't have to pay anything. So even if you don't ride a motorcycle, it might be a card worth getting because it's $50. I don't know what AAA is, and so it's just kind of worked out both ways.
If I'm in a situation where my battery's dead, I can't pull the battery out for whatever reason, can I hook the trickle charger up to the battery with the terminals on and just use an extension cord, bring it out to wherever the machine is, and
So you're saying leave these connected
and then
and
hook
then
on
plug in this to it.
the trickle
I saw
charger?
a head shaking, and he knows more about electricity than me.
You can't do that, unfortunately. The purpose of a trickle charger is to introduce a small amount of energy over time so that you allow these are essentially chemistry boxes. So you're trying to reverse the chemical reactions slowly. If you do it quickly, you get some weird effects where you get salts that are created inside of this is like a lead acid deep cell, I assume. So you can damage it if you charge it too quickly. So the purpose of a trickle charger is to do that slowly over the course of a couple days. So for that reason, if you were trying to start, you'll notice that most batteries have a cold cranking amps rating, which is close to 300 amps. So they're trying to move a bunch of physical metal and things like that. So they need a lot of energy to move that. And the trickle charger just can't provide that.
What about just trickle charging? Can the terminal or can the wires stay on while it's charging over a long period of time?
Yeah, so the question was, can the wires stay on while trickle charging? Definitely. So the downside of doing that, so there's I had a Ford F-250 that I had an electrical issue for a long time, and I realized that Ford spec'd up to 100 milliamps of drain even when the truck is parked. So what's happening is, even when it's plugged in, there's like a small parasitic draw is what we call that. So if you plug in the trickle charger, it's charging slowly, but it's enough to overcome that 100 milliamps. So it's not harming anything. You're not going to cause any corrosion or anything like that. You don't, strictly speaking, have to completely pull it off, but it'll take longer to trickle charge. So if you're doing it, 24 hours before, as Chris said, pull off the contacts. It'll work more effectively, and you're not losing all the parasitics through the rest of the system.
And a trickle charger versus a jump start, and the amount of power being transferred being the big difference. And so kind of an in-between would be that you have somebody's car that you're running and you've connected your jumper cables to it. You've left your battery connected on the dead machine. You would actually, I've sat there with my foot on the throttle in park with the brake on, or in neutral with the brake on, depending on what type of vehicle it is, and done that for 3 to 5 minutes before. So you're introducing a higher amperage, I believe it is, to then help push past that, because again, sitting at idle, the alternator might not be doing anything. It might not be sending anything back in. And so obviously you don't want to do that for a long period of time, but it is possible. And there are really fancy and expensive boxes that you can get. I mean, like $250, but if you have a constant problem, it might be worth it. And then of course, make sure that lives in the warm environment, fully charged. Thanks, Chris. And then I'll just go over on a couple more things on this. This specific battery, or any battery really, is ways to clean it. Because if you don't have good connections, or it was left outside, or didn't have the appropriate cover on it and it got dirty, this guy will clean your female bits, and these guys will clean your male bits, and there's different sizes. And you can also use just steel wool and sandpaper. I've had ones that are so badly corroded, and these ones here don't have all that much going on, but I've had ones where there's 6, 7 things coming off of the power side, and so I had to clean all the little washers and sand off the rust and corrosion that was there. Depending on what's going on, they make these little terminal protectors, and they can help, and they would go underneath your connection just so that it's not sitting in anything. This one would not work because the posts on that battery are incorrect. And so ideally, you can get things out of cover and into warm spaces and fully charged before putting them away. This one here, if we did not change our key from run to off, probably gonna have a parasitic draw, and eventually that thing is gonna go dead. Now, who knows? Might be the loose battery connection, might be the alternator, but this is where that diagnosis process comes into play, and you get to be a bit of your own mechanic. And so, on the, I guess just on the kit, back to the kit, one thing that I found, it's 2 products, but slightly different products. You have thread locker, red and blue. Red means basically forever, and blue means you probably want it to come back off. And if you don't have if you have something that is constantly coming loose, you might want to put that on there. However, I would not recommend putting it on a battery, because now you've just created more weird gooiness in there where you're passing a lot of power. I had a dump trailer that had a battery that, again, had a bunch of stacks of different things coming off of them. So you have a washer that has a wire, and another washer that has a wire, and another washer, and it came loose, and there was enough of a gap where it was arcing, and I almost melted my battery. Like there was a depression in where it was. And if I hadn't been listening and heard the popping of the arc, I wouldn't have, or maybe if I would have looked at the battery sooner, but who knows. I didn't check my connections, and so I had to hear it. And then at that point, the damage had already been done, and that battery was basically toast. So, electricity is definitely something to be very conscious about. Heat, flammables are also things to be very conscious about. Do we have any more specific questions? Because I have 2 more things, but we would actually go out into the garage to talk about. Any last little bits while we're in here where it's warm and lighted? Cool. So we were talking about all the different bits and pieces of caution. So batteries, electricity, you know, the exhaust can be hot. Of course, there's little symbols everywhere that tell you what could happen. And they seem like nothing, but they can be big. And so one of the biggest things in your shop, which has all your stuff, might be connected to your house, might be connected to other things, is where do we store these things that are dangerous? Now, this is a metal container, so it's safe-ish, right? I've got the metal cans that you saw inside. Maybe you could or couldn't tell that they were actually metal. That's a lot safer than plastic because plastic can be melted or be more easily cracked and you might not notice it. So one of the things that I like to do, and it's required if you have a commercial space, and I got this at an auction and bought it sight unseen, and I was a little unhappy just because it's not the greatest, but this is a flammables cabinet. So anything in here, not just fuel, but anything that could be flammable. I've got mineral spirits in there. I just happen to keep some of my old oils in there. PB Blaster isn't as bad, but starting fluid, obviously meant to be, meant to help start things. And so if you had stains or other things, I would recommend keeping them in an area like this. And then you have to make sure you shut it, because basically what this does is makes it harder for fire to get in there. It also vents itself such that it's less likely to create a contained environment of fuse that could combust on their own. A lot of the newfangled fuel containers have all these things. They're EPA and it's really annoying and it sucks, but it does help the pressurizing, because if you if it's in the sun and then in the cold, it expands and contracts, and that can help it deal with that pressure change. However, a lot of the times those things fail. I've found that they fail and they cause more leaking. So I do a lot of taking the cap off entirely, or the fill spout, having the appropriate funnel, and then pouring in from there. If you get into bigger machines, you can start getting into fuel transfer tanks. But for smaller machines, you want to be really conscious of how and where you fill it. So this one, in this example here, we have a really hard to access port, and we also have potentially a really hot exhaust right here. So if I just ran out of fuel and I only got 2 more beds to go, and I really want to get it done, I want to be extra cautious and potentially even let it sit and let this cool down, that I don't get anything here. Now, the fumes from gasoline can catch fire, or it can be sparked by other things. So obviously you don't want the machine running. If you can give this some time to cool down, you're in a better spot. But if you get any fuel on here, it's a very big thing you don't want to do, because it can cause major problems. So in this case, if I remember how to do this correctly, I would move it out of the way so I have good access. And in fact, I wouldn't work over this because I might burn my leg and then spill everything as I'm running away. So creating good access, and then, while we're looking at my feet maybe, or the machine, I have good solid boots. I'm not wearing flip-flops. I'm not wearing something that, sparks or things could go through. And it gives you that little bit more time to be protected from any potential, if it was fire or anything else like that. These good, solid, hard materials are also good. Anything made of any of the plastic fibers, so any poofy jackets, they're going to be really flammable. So wool and heavy cotton are basically your best bets for kind of dealing with that sort of thing. And then if something does happen, you're as protected as you can be for that. So any questions on fuel storage? Any questions in general? Do BCSs have fork attachments? As far as I know, no. You would need a lot of counterweight. There's no hydraulics to lift up. And actually, on this machine, so this machine and this combo, if I just put a little pressure down there, it falls. And that's because it's not appropriately weighted. And that's most likely because I got that with a smaller BCS in mind. You could also put weights on it. It might cause problems down the line, but it would be just countered with body weight because there's no upward ability for it to pick besides what you push down. But they make them for dingoes. Little mini walk behind things. But they cost a little bit more than these guys. And they don't really help you in a market garden situation. So yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left. Any other questions, topics? Maybe not too many topics, but something else while we're sitting here in the cold.
I'm just curious if you're saying charging batteries quickly might shorten the lifespan. So does jumping a battery damage it?
So probably not, because when you're jumping a battery, what you're actually doing, you're not actually trying to charge that battery. The battery's in the system, but what you're actually trying to do is engage the engine. So you're trying to recreate those cold cranking amps that the battery normally provides by having a secondary battery that's running at the same time. And that's why you're gunning it and kind of simultaneously trying to turn the key. So that excess charge from the other battery is going to the engine rather than the battery itself. But to answer your first question, yes, you could damage if you had battery to battery, or big battery to little battery, and you're just like letting it dump. Definitely, you can cause issues. But I can go into that a little bit.
Cables hooked up from a big battery to a tiny one for a long time.
So this is where we get into like battery, assuming they're the same battery chemistries. So if you had a lead acid battery, that's kind of your standard, car battery, they stabilize at the same voltage. So what you would be effectively doing, let's say that the big battery is twice the size of the small battery. The big battery would discharge into the small battery, and as that small battery is growing in charge, its voltage is slowly climbing up. So there will become a point where, your nominal kind of happy battery voltage is about 13.5 volts or so. So if your small dead battery is at about 12.5 and your happy battery not hooked up to your car, because your car alternator is at about 14 and a half volts. So that happy battery is at 13.5. It charges and it slowly loses, let's say it goes down to 13.4 volts. Your little battery goes up to 13.5. Now the differential is such that the little battery is higher in voltage. So, it's going to stabilize back and kind of do the same thing. And then they'll both kind of level out to the same voltage. And when they're the same voltage, there's no differential to cause current flow.
I see. But the voltage is very different. Maybe there would be a flow.
Exactly. Yeah, and the voltage of these batteries depends on their fundamental chemistry. So like a lithium polymer is 4.2 volts, lithium ion is 4.2 volts, lead acid is...
What size it is.
Correct, exactly. So the larger size you get, the more current you get, which is why we have such huge honking batteries in our car, because we're looking for 300 amps. If you think about your house wiring, which is AC, that's a whole separate topic, but your breakers are at 15 amps, right? So you're talking about, 30 times or 20 times that, I can't math, just turning on your car.
So on that note, there is a 101 electricity workshop with Chris,
Yes, yeah.
where you can go dive deep into that.
I'd love
I
to
do
talk
have-
more about it, yeah.
One more thing to point out for any machines, big, small, is that this has nothing to do with the engine, but this has to do with what you're doing with the machine. So you're asking the machine to do something for you. Usually it involves pummeling snow in this case, or dirt, or soil, or compost, or all the other things. That impact over and over and over again creates wear. So on these machines are wearable parts. And so you never want to get into the point where you've gone past your wearable and into your structure, because now you have a much bigger cost. So knowing what your wearable parts are and where too worn is, just like knowing where your tires are too worn, and it's going to be dangerous because it's going to snow and you don't have any traction. This is sort of the same thing, your optimum efficiency for cost as well as use. You might be doing something that might take 3 times longer because you don't have the appropriate amount of ability for it to wear, or in the case of a rototiller, it's instead of being a nice 90, it's now like a little L or straight line, and it's not doing anything for you. So in this case, I can tell that this little bit here is on, it has two little bolts, and it can be adjusted, and that is one piece that is meant to wear. These arms are going to be similar, and they do appear that you can replace them, but they're not really running on anything, and it's snow, so it's not as big of an issue, but it's something to be very aware of. And when you borrow something from somebody and you go into anything beyond their wearables, they are not going to be happy because you've destroyed the thing that was able to do the work, and now it needs a lot more replacing. So that's being really conscious of what that is and how that can get to that point. And if it's talking to them beforehand, if it's looking online, if it's seeing, okay, what is the appropriate, what is this supposed to look like, and then where am I wearing too much away? And then also checking it before you work, while you're working, and then after. And this mainly applies to dirt type and soil type work, but a lot of these small engines are doing that stuff for us. And then also if it comes to like a mower blade or something like that, it can be more efficient if it's sharp. So being aware of your surroundings and what type of wear and tear might be on the machine will also help you kind of keep it going as long as possible. Thanks guys for coming.
Yeah, thanks, guys.